Richard Feynman once said, "I would rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned." There's lots of stuff that we don't know about the universe. Even the things that we do know, like the Big Bang and the age of the Earth and evolution, we don't know everything about. And we're constantly reminded of this by religious apologists who point to anything that science can't answer yet as an everlasting mystery that proves the existence of God, and everything that science has answered as fine-tuned complexity that also somehow proves the existence of God. And of course, when I say God, I mean their preferred God from their preferred interpretation of their preferred translation of their preferred version of their preferred holy book. But while we're all able to agree that science has plenty of questions to answer because it is built upon the idea of questioning things, try questioning that God, and suddenly skeptics are labeled as disrespectful, arrogant, or even dangerous. The very same people who consider their Google searches to be enough to dismiss the expert opinions of the world's most brilliant minds scoff and scowl at any reasoned attempt to question the unassailable wisdom of a God who can't even foresee his own failure with the power of omniscience. Many of the people who call into our shows have built their entire identities on a doctrine that they have never critically examined. But if your God can't stand up to criticism, then why does it deserve the title of God? If simply questioning whether God is good, whether God is wise, or whether God even exists in the first place offends you, then maybe it's not the questions that are the problem. Maybe it's the fragile answers that you've been clinging to. But if you think that you have better answers than the vapid excuses that we hear on this show every single week, then call in, because the show starts right now. Welcome, one and all, to the Atheist Experience. I am joined today by the Godless engineer. John, how are you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. I've just got back from actually a national park trip where I spent 2 weeks going around to all the national parks in Utah. And then we went to the Grand Canyon and we went to other places like in Nevada, Death Valley. Death Valley was pretty cool. It was awesome.
Nice. I love that. I am doing that same. I've been home, but I'm about to leave on a trip to Borneo the middle of next week. And dude, I am so unbelievably stressed trying to get everything in order before being gone for a month of giving tours on the other side of the world. It is madness. But on the plus side, right now, we got a great show for you guys. Couple of quick things before we get started. The first thing is that I have to remind everybody that this is the Atheist Experience, which is a product of the atheist community of Austin, which is a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And because we are a nonprofit organization here at the ACA, I am also compelled to remind everyone, and what I mean by that is I'm compelled to remind myself that as I was just reminded before the show starts by the showrunners that because this is a 501c3, we cannot specifically condone or endorse any political position or person. We cannot tell you who we think you should vote for or should not vote for, or what bills you should or should not be supporting. We can support ideas and ideals, but we cannot support specific people or rally against specific people. That is the nature of being a nonprofit organization. So it's very important that I remind everybody that I am not allowed to share any specific political opinions about any specific politicians or things that you should be. I cannot even encourage you to vote. I just have to remind you all that that is what my limitations are in the show, and that's not the fault of the ACA. That is the nature of being a nonprofit organization, which they are, and they do incredible work, and I'm proud to support them with a show that I do here. So just want to throw that out there for everybody who is curious about the tone that I may take on this show. If certain topics come up, I may be more deflective. That's why, I don't want anybody thinking that I'm apathetic here. With that, we've got a great show for everybody today. The number there on the bottom of the screen, 512-991-9242, or I believe there's also a link that you can click in the description that you can call in over them internets if you don't want to use up your data. These are ways you can contact us. John and I are real live atheists. They caught us, they ensnared us, and they forced us to do this show so that we can tell theists and creationists and anybody else who believes in gods or demons or devils or angels or spirits or ghosts or in a literal 6-day creation or that evolution and the Big Bang aren't real or whatever else. They can call us and we can actually have serious, reasonable conversations, because very often we find that people in these communities have never had the opportunity to actually talk to somebody who disagrees with them. So we're here to solve that problem. We're here to give you the opportunity to actually have these conversations and test your ideas. Put your faith to the test. Defend the god or gods that you believe in against heathens like us who do this evil thing called asking questions. That's what we're here for, and we hope that you call in. We hope you can have some fun with us. John, a man, do you have anything you want to say before we jump in?
In the spirit of today's poll, is the human body intelligently designed? Speaking as somebody with a broke ass pancreas, no, it is not. The fact that the pancreas can break in general, I think, is total bullshit. And he should have went back to the drawing board on that bullshit, and he had thought about some better bullshit in order to replace the bullshit that he came up with. So just wanted to put that out there.
It is wild to have one massive gland that just does one really big job. It does other stuff, but like one really big job, and it can fuck up that easily. You know what I mean? And you're just kind of left SOL without that. I don't know. That one gets me. I love it whenever people call in to talk to me about the creation of the eye, the irreducible complexity, the divine beauty of the eye. And I'm like, have you ever dissected one? Do you know how messy they are? Do you know your retina is backwards, sir? And like I've like 99 times out of 100, if someone's calling in to talk about how perfectly designed the eyeball is, that person does wear glasses. And so like, it's just, you've got your retina backwards. You've got a massive blind spot. You only have 3 types of cone cells. What the hell did cephalopods do to get the cool eyes that we don't get? You know what I mean? I don't know. There's a lot there. If you are, in the poll right now, I see we've got, looks like 3% of people in the poll. We have a lot of atheists watching today, but it looks like 3% of the people who answer the poll, which is 3% of the entire world, because that's who watches this show, is literally everyone on the planet, have said that, yes, the human body is intelligently designed, and yes, they will call the show about it. So, I mean, flip, dude, this is your chance. Call in and let's talk. Lines are already filling up, and we do have what we usually prioritize theist calls, but we actually have a ton of atheist calls. We have a theist who's currently in the screening room right now, but as we just got started, it takes a minute. I'm going to jump in really quickly with an atheist caller, just because of the nature of how we started the show. Let's talk for a second to Nick, pronouns he, him, calling in all the way from Cactus Angles. We're talking about spiky things in interesting shapes. I don't know. Who has a question about trans people? Nick, you're on the line with Forrest and John. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you guys?
Never had a bad day, man.
Doing all right.
You know that Jesus gave up almost a whole weekend for your sins, right?
Yeah, so I've heard.
Yeah, so it must be your church hurt that makes you hate him so much. But my question is this. I think you guys do a great job of explaining trans rights, and I believe firmly in trans rights. And I think the basic issue is that they deny that there's a difference between sex and gender. But I'm wondering if it might not be an alternate approach, a second approach, to talk to them about why they care. Because I don't think, I think that the results of everything that's happened recently is that two people who are athletes, are no longer allowed to play the sports that they were playing because of all that's happened. And it seems like it affects so few people. Not that those people aren't important and don't deserve, every right that everyone else has, and especially the right to dignity. But what I'm saying is that it affects so few people that their concern about the issue is overblown. And I think it's overblown because of a bunch of crooks, a bunch of grifters who make them care for their own ends. And I'm wondering if...
Definitely asking people why they're upset about trans folks is important in its own right. Because at the end of the day, you are correct to say that a bunch of politicians are making this an issue. Trans people account for a tiny portion of the population, and a bunch of politicians are making it out that there's this massive problem and blah, 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 blah. And here's the thing for me, is the reason why I don't land on that argument of why do you care, these are so few people, is because it doesn't address the fundamental issue that it doesn't matter if this accounts for 99% of the population or literally one person in the country. My argument would be the same, which is about basic rights and dignity and like the existence of these people. There is scientific backing for these people, but even without that, we're just talking about being a person and having fundamental, basic rights and dignity at any other person should be afforded. Maybe just start with the fact that you can be kicked out of your home, you can be evicted for being trans. Like we can start there. You know what I mean? Like I think when you compound that on top of the fact that like the attack ads that are being levied against these people by the tiny percent of the population they are, we're talking about millions of dollars being spent for every trans person to put national news out saying how evil they are. But at the end of the day, that I think is very important to be a secondary, if not a tertiary conversation, because the primary conversation needs to be about like, why is it acceptable to you to pick and choose who you do and do not think is it okay to discriminate against? I just think you should just not discriminate against people. And if you don't understand somebody, then you should ask some questions or maybe just shut the fuck up. Because at the end of the day, all of the anti-trans arguments that I deal with on a daily basis and all the ones that I see being levied all over the world and with the news media, social media, whatever, are literally word for word the exact same arguments that were being used when I was in high school against same-sex marriage. It's the same bioessentialist, we have to maintain a civilization and the fall of Rome and blah, blah, blah. It's the same brainless, dumb shit, just with a new scapegoat in mind, because if we hurt these people, maybe that'll solve our problems this time. And that isn't how thinking works, and that isn't how progress works. So I want that to be where I focus my arguments. If you have a different argument style, feel free to try it. But for me, it just doesn't work for me.
I agree with you about the Prime Directive. Mm-hmm. I just think that the arguments can exist side by side, and possibly sort of the arguments can possibly develop sort of a symbiotic relationship.
Sure, but like I said, I think they need to be secondary or tertiary. I don't think you should lean on that alone, because at the end of the day, what that sounds like to me is, listen, it's okay to hate these people, just don't make it a priority. You know what I mean?
No.
I don't think that's what you're saying, but I know that's what a transphobe will hear.
Part of my argument is that the reason that they care is because they're made to care. In other words, they've always been sort of crotch sniffy in my experience all my life. It's always been sort of a sex thing that they sort of focus on. But I think, I don't know, I think that they could be made not to care as much as they do for the right reason, for both right reasons. For the reason
if you
that you described.
If you can find a way to convince a transphobe not to care, call back in and let me know about it. But as of right now, they are transvestigating the Pope, y'all. So I don't know what else to tell you. It seems to me like the state of people's genitals is the primary concern for a lot of people out there, and so it should be our primary concern to make sure that human rights and advocacy is our primary concern, especially as allies, especially as cisgender people. John, you look like you're about to say something.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm rather perplexed by the idea that you can convince transphobes to not care as much in this particular respect. The transvestigating the Pope is a good example. There's also another example of, I believe in Boston, there was a hotel that actually they forced a gender check on a couple of women that were going to use the public restroom in the hotel. Mm-hmm. I remember that happened while I was on vacation. And I think that it's crazy to think that you can actually get, people that are doing these types of things to just not care about those things anymore. I feel like it's been catapulted into the public sphere so hard, and it's been focused on so much that I think that these types of people, that is what they're focusing on. Like, it's just like in the 1950s and prior to the 1950s where, people were highly focused on like segregation and like suppressing the rights of people of color. And I really don't think that I feel like it's a subject that's here to stay, and the people that are so intensely focused on it now, I don't think that there's anything that we can say necessarily that will get them to focus away from it or not take it so seriously. I think the only way that that's going to happen is if, they stop doing it themselves. And I think the only thing that we can do is just consistently push back against the bigotry that's levied in the LGBTQ community's direction. I think if we band together and we all say we're not going to stand for this, like as a community here in America, just in general, I think that is the way that we'll eventually, phase it out of the public discussion. But, I think that it's going to take a long time.
I appreciate you guys. I think that those were great answers. I really appreciate it, guys. I'm a big fan. And the last thing I want to say is there may be a God. I can't prove there isn't, but I'm sure there isn't an intelligent designer, because no supreme intelligence would design a world in which any grifter or moron could claim to speak for him.
That is the definition of the problem, isn't it? I would also encourage you, Nick. John and I, much to the public chagrin, are not the trans whisperers. And so, like, if you want to hear if you want to talk more about, I'm happy to have this conversation. But also, there are real live trans people out there that host call-in shows just like this. So I would encourage talking to them as well and see what arguments they find are effective and best serve their purposes of reminding people that they exist and that they don't deserve to be made into political pawns for dumbass discussions. So I would call Arden Hart and Dr. Ben and Katie Montgomery and Luxander and Josie Caballero and talk to them about, why they do what they do and the success and failures that they've had talking to different people of different stripes, and what they think is the most important way, the most effective way for you to be an ally to them. I think that would be a much better conversation than talking to me about, what argument style that I use as yet another cishet white man on the internet.
I would like to echo that sentiment. I am just another cishet white dude, white hick hillbilly dude from North Alabama. So, like, I'm probably not the best person to go to for that.
Anyway, thank you very much, Nick. I appreciate you calling in and talking to us, kicking off the show.
Dude, thank you. Thank you. Thank you
bye-bye.
very much. Will do.
Good first call. Good first call.
Yeah.
And that also, while we were talking, that got a couple of our theists through our call screen. But wait, before we talk to those theists, I have words that I am required to say. And the first one is this over here. If you like what we do, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Giving to our Patreon ensures our ability to continue to produce the content that you love. Visit tiny.cc/PatreonAXP to find out more. You can also support us by sending super chats. Send them in, and we will read as many of them as we can during the show, probably towards the end. You can also become a channel member for as little as 99 cents a month. Click the join button down below the video, and it'll give you access to special chat emojis and also special YouTube shorts and clips. You get early access, it looks like. That's pretty cool. You can get your AXP merch at tiny.cc/merch ACA. We got t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, hats, pint glasses, mugs, phone cases. You can buy little pieces of John. You do all sorts of things over there at tiny.cc/merch ACA. And we also want to send a big shout out and thank you to our amazing crew who put this show together every week. We got video operators, we got audio operators, we got note takers, we got call screeners, we got chat mods. We have also yeah, we have all sorts of things for you guys to participate in this channel, and those guys make it possible. So check all those things out if you want to support the channel a little bit more. And with that, let's talk to Hank, pronouns he and him, who is a deist, who wants to talk about 5 scientific evidences for God. Hank, you are on AXP with Forrest and John. How you doing today?
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. I'm excited for these 5 scientific evidences for God because I've heard a lot of different ones, and so I'm hoping that you can break the trend of them all being bullshit. So I'm ready for it.
John, are you an actual engineer? I'm just curious.
I really hate that question because it automatically assumes that I'm just lying to people. That's an uncharitable way to interpret it. But yes, I'm an actual engineer. I have 2 engineering degrees. They're right on my bookshelf behind me. So, yeah.
Well, I apologize. I didn't mean to offend you.
I know. Like I said, that was a very.
So I was just curious.
No, that's perfectly fine. I know that you didn't mean it like that. It just comes across that way to me sometimes. I didn't mean to say that you were being that way, but yeah. Anyways.
I get it. I get asked if I'm a real biologist all the time, and funny enough, the line, the goalpost for being a real biologist is always one step further than anything I tell them I've done. It doesn't matter what it is. You don't have a degree? Yes, I do. I have several. Well, you've never worked in this area? Yes, I have actually. Well, you don't have a great advanced degree? Got 2 of them actually. Well, you don't. It's yeah, I get it. It's just the nature of being on the internet. Anyway, Hank, talk to me, man. What's going on with these scientific evidences? Let's start with the first one and go from there.
Okay, I had to tell the screener something. These are evidences that I think point toward a God for me. And you may well disagree that they're scientific or whatever, but my idea of a God
do you interpret them as scientific, or are they just things that are compelling to you?
I think they point towards scientific evidence.
Okay.
You certainly can't prove there's a God. I understand that. But I think they point toward, and I think they're different than anything you've ever heard before.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I will be approaching it from a scientific lens. It's my job, but I'm not going to hold you to the adjective of scientific too hard. We'll explore what you have to say for a minute.
Sure, I'm interested in y'all's opinion of what I think about this. But my idea about a God is some being that doesn't interfere with the development of the universe. He set it up, and then it's just letting it go. But he does guide it toward having an overall plan that has developed into humans, and that humans are getting better all the time. So with that explanation, I'll start out and say, number one, the research that I've seen about near-death experiences indicates that the experiences are usually pleasant. If that's true, which is all I've been able to find out, there must be something that's that's moving that in the direction of being pleasant. And I'm glad you're on, Forrest, because I think it's pretty obvious that it would not be evolution that's doing this. It's something beyond what we're looking at, since it's not random, that is biasing this toward being a pleasant experience, which I think points towards something that is doing this.
So, if let me ask a question. In these NDEs, how are you sure that these experiences are happening during brain death and not on either side of the brain coming back, like oxygen being restored, so oxygen and circulation being restored to the brain? How do you know that it's happening in that time of brain death?
I would not know that, John. I just have to take people at their word, and like I said, the research that I've read about online talks about this, and sometimes they seem to do things that you look at and say, that's not possible that they could have known this, like being above their body and seeing things.
But you see, that's a thought-stopping technique. Sorry, Hank. That's a thought-stopping technique, to sit there and be like, "Oh, there's no way they could have known this." That's classic thought-stopping, like, rhetoric there, because my brain does not stop. Maybe it's because of I've got ADHD or whatever, but my brain does not stop whenever you tell me something like that, because it's like you're telling me that these people knew things that they could have never known. So you're telling me that there's no way that your brain could subconsciously pick up on different things that are talked about between the doctors, or maybe things that your brain sensed that you weren't conscious that your brain picked up on. I mean, subliminal messaging and all of that is used regularly in in advertising and everything. So your brain picks up on a whole lot more information than you're consciously aware of. And when you tell me, oh, it's impossible for them to know this, I automatically doubt that, and I call bullshit on it, because of the fact that we know brains are complicated, because of the fact that we know that we can't pin down when these experiences are happening. And as far as we can tell, when the brain starts to die and it loses oxygen and all that, like people start, the brain goes into like these death throes, and it tries to, it does different things. And like one of those things is these experiences. And so like you're going to need to be able to understand and be able to point with evidence at the idea that this is happening during the time of brain death and no time afterwards. Did you happen to read, and I don't know if Forrest might know the study that was done on this, but they actually did do a study on NDEs where they placed a piece of paper with something written on it above the lights in the room, where if there was an NDE and a person that like died on the table for a while and rose out of their bodies and whatnot, they would be able to see this paper, and nobody ever in the study that they looked at was able to accurately describe what was on the paper. So like, I guess all of the evidence actually points away from NDEs and not towards NDEs. And I'm kind of curious as to what you have been reading that has convinced you that NDEs are accurate.
Well, I guess I would like to go back to the point I was making was not about the NDEs, but that whatever these experiences are, my research looks like they're saying that they were usually almost always pleasant. And why would they be pleasant? That was the point I was trying to make.
I would imagine if I had to hazard a guess, you know, I haven't done any serious studying on NDEs. I'm looking them up right now just to see, because there is actual research, and here I found this paper, which is literally just what happens in the brain when we die, deciphering the neurophysiology in the final moments of life by Schlobin et al. From 2023 in Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience. And I've kind of been just skimming through it to see if there's like a predictable pattern in which things shut down in the brain. I haven't found anything. Like I said, I'm literally just scanning this for the first time as we're talking here. But like, if I had to hazard a guess, I would bet money that the brain evolved from the inside out. So the very, very center part of the brain down to the brain stem and everything like that. Those are the parts that are really responsible for like controlling your vital functions. And then you go a little bit further from there and you get like the thinky parts. And then the outermost, the cerebral cortex, the very outer parts, those are, you know, especially like this frontal area here is parts where you actually do like critical thinking, executive function, decision making, all these things where you're actually considering life. And so if I had to hazard a guess about this stuff, I would say that almost certainly your brain's going to shut down from the outside in as well. I have some good reason to say that, but again, this is not my area of expertise. I want to be very sure that I'm not speaking, you know, too far out of my area, but like, I know for sure that like when I once passed out from blood loss, I lost my hearing first, then I lost my vision, and my heart kept beating, which would tell me that like my temporal lobes, this superior temporal lobe was shutting down, my occipital lobe was shutting down, my frontal lobe was shutting down, I was losing consciousness. But at the end of the day, my midbrain was still working, my brainstem was still working, my articular formation was still working, like all the parts of the brain that keep me alive and do stuff are still working.
Anything we can do to
And so-
ask.
Sorry, hold on a second. Anything I could do to ask? I got a weird.
Sorry, I was typing it. I forgot to mute myself when I was typing.
That's
so it's my
okay.
fault.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm assuming that's what the something was saying. Somebody was saying something to me. But yes, if I had to hazard a guess about all this, that would be my explanation for that. You get a pleasant experience because the part of your brain that's real good at producing anxiety and thinking so hard about things is shutting down. You know, your dreams tend to be, you know, generally pleasantish experiences, and that's not entirely the same thing at all. But like, you know, if you're losing consciousness, if you're drifting away from reality, makes sense that it would be a relatively, you know, relaxing thing, if not a happy, excitable thing, but like chill. It'd be a chill thing. So I don't know, man. That's kind of where I'm at with it. Even if I didn't know that, though, even if I didn't have any good reason to say any of that, the idea that like slipping out of consciousness being not scary, not necessarily frightening, that would just kind of follow logical sense to me to say like I'm not holding on to the fear of death anymore because I'm drifting out of the part of my mind that is concerned with that sort of thing. That's my whole thing.
Okay. Sounds reasonable. Okay. Number two, when I think about my life, my consciousness, and the fact that really all of us here our consciousness has been placed in a body during a time when there's modern medicine and all the other advantages that exist today. I think about what's the probability that I happen to be, and that everybody today, at least in America to a large extent, is in such a really good time. And I think that probability is pretty small. If you want to say, is it possible that your consciousness is put into bodies all through time, so that you have experienced this many times before? It kind of answers a lot of questions about justice, which doesn't necessarily have to be true. But if that was the case, something is doing something with these individual consciousness that is placing it from one time period to another. I know that sounds like reincarnation, but it just seems, I was just looking at the probabilities. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Not really. It sounds like you're saying that, like, we're born with our consciousness in our body and we get to experience things. We agree on that. And it sounds like the evidence for a God here is that our experiences are pretty good right now. Times are good. Things are going well. And I don't get the connection there, because, like, they're not going well for everybody. Well, they could be a whole hell of a lot better. And what does that say about, you know, the millennia before us where things were going worse than now? So, like, what, I don't get it. Maybe I'm missing something.
Okay, maybe if I said, why wasn't my consciousness put in a body 200 years ago when things would have been much rougher for me?
Oh. So
why did I get this?
Your consciousness is an emergent property of your brain. So, like, this particular arrangement of neurons hadn't happened yet, I suppose, and also experiences, because it's not all just, you know, brain states. It's also, you know, your life experiences around you that shape and mold your personality and blah blah blah. Like, you're a unique little snowflake, and you hadn't been born yet. And so, like, again, if that is the case, even if I didn't have an answer for, like, where our consciousness comes from or where personalities come from, anything like that, what about the people who were born a little bit ago during slavery? Was that evidence that God wasn't real then, that they were born into such a horrible situation? What about the people who are born right now in parts of the world or even parts of this country where they're subjected to horrible atrocities? There's wars going on right now. There's a genocide going on right now. We have a prison industrial complex right now. Like, we've got a lot of bad shit going on in the world. So what about the people born in those bodies that are experiencing those bad times? Is that evidence against a God, whereas your good experience is evidence for a God? I don't know, man. That one doesn't really hold up with me.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm talking about, Forrest, is that if they were born in multiple experiences, that would explain why you're sometimes in a good place and sometimes in a bad place.
Well, so if I can ask, how is this scientific evidence for God? Maybe I lost that in the beginning explanation, because I thought we were supposed to be talking about scientific evidence for God, right? So how does this prove that God exists?
If our consciousness is in multiple bodies over time, somebody is or something is putting that consciousness in different bodies.
Okay, what's your proof that our consciousness is something that's not an emergent property of our brain, and that can be transported across time and space to different brains and different bodies? Like, where's your evidence that this can even actually happen?
John, I'm not trying to present any proof because I know I can't. I was just looking at the probabilities of me just having this great experience compared to the probability of it happening multiple times, and this just happens.
So hold on, Hank. I don't understand the point of this particular point in your 5 scientific evidences that prove God. Like, if it's not meant to be some kind of evidence that persuades you in the direction of God, then why is it in the list? Like, why are we discussing this? Like, it just seems weird. I ask you for evidence, and you say, oh, this isn't meant to prove God, but yet we asked you, like, how does this prove God? And you're trying to answer it, but it's apparently not supposed to prove God. I'm thoroughly confused. I don't know. Forrest, do you understand?
It sounds more like what Hank is saying is that, like, things are going real, and maybe again, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to straw man you here. It sounds like what you're saying is that times are really good for you personally, And that seems unlikely considering how shitty times have been for everybody else in history, including today. So God. And I can't wrap my head around that.
Okay. I'll try one more time and then I'll drop it, okay? Times
Sure.
are really good for me right now. But if my consciousness has been in multiple bodies across time, then
It hasn't.
this is just one of those times that are good for me.
Right, but it hasn't. It hasn't been in multiple bodies across time. We have no reason to say that that's true.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. What evidence is there that our consciousness has been in multiple bodies across time? Like you're spouting that, you're just throwing that out there in the clouds. Like you're just picking it. Like it just seems like a random thought that you're picking out, of your thoughts there. Like what if our consciousness was thrown into some kind of extraterrestrial that lives in a utopia? Like that seems like that would be a much better situation than us living here on Earth amongst all of the unnecessary suffering and evil that we find ourselves in. Like, what does that mean? The fact that God, that this creator that you think that this points to, puts us here in this hellscape rather than in a utopia. Like, I don't know. It just seems like you're just randomly picking a topic out and saying, well, what if this?
Okay, guys, I concede. I give up. That
Well, can you instead of giving up on it, can I just ask, like, why do you say that? Because I know you said to John you can't prove it. So why do you say it? Why do you say that your consciousness has existed in lots of other bodies? What makes you believe that's true?
I'm saying that because I think the probability that I just happen to be put in this great time is very much less than the probability that I have been in different bodies multiple times across time. I'm just looking at probabilities. That's it.
Do you think, okay, so I'm going to ignore most of that because it's a whole other scientific question, just to try to get to your point. Do you think that times now are better than they were, so let's say 200 or 300 years ago?
I think mankind has improved, and I definitely think the time for me right now would be better than if I had been born 200 years ago.
Okay, I can agree to that. I feel the same way. Do you think that things are going to continue to get better, though? Like as science continues to progress and technology continues to progress, do you think that 300 years from now, life might be even better than it is at this moment?
I think the probability is very good that it will be better, although I realize that things get better and then sometimes they'll get worse, sometimes they'll get better,
Sure.
But on a long scale time, we're headed upward.
Sure.
We're doing better.
I can agree to that more or less. Yeah, sure, there's special circumstances, and yes, things do fluctuate, but overall, I agree. I think things are getting better. So if you're saying that it's so spectacularly unlikely that you were born in this time when things are so good, then why don't you think it would be more evidence for this God? It would be more spectacular if you were born 500 years from now when things are really good. And if you were born then you would be looking back at today in 2025 and saying, oof, man, I could have been born back then when they still didn't have a cure for cancer yet. And you still had to pay an arm and a leg for basic health care. And where trans people weren't, equally represented. And that's, to me, it sounds like your argument only works if time stops tomorrow. And this is the best it's ever going to get.
No, I'm saying maybe I will be born again 500 years from now.
Do you? But what we're trying to get across is that there's no good reason to think that happens. We have no evidence whatsoever of a brain or of a mind existing outside of a body, and we have no evidence whatsoever of someone's consciousness being transplanted into somebody else or being born again. We don't have any reason to think any of that. You said some stuff about probability. I don't think it's reasonable. But at the end of the day, even if that is what happened, that doesn't mean that there's a God doing it. That just means that that's a thing that happens. That doesn't necessitate any kind of arbiter for that sort of thing. It sounds to me like you've made a lot of assumptions here, and I don't understand why.
As I said, I was just, in my mind, that looks like evidence, not proof, certainly not proof, that something is controlling, if that's the truth. And I know that there's no evidence for that. I agree with you 100%. But if that's,
let's try number 3.
Something is controlling.
Let's try number 3 then, because we're gonna disagree on that, but maybe number 3 will shed more light. So what's your third evidence for God? So far we've been about 10 minutes on each one. Let's hear the next one. I don't think we're gonna get through all 5 at this rate, but I want to hear another one.
Well, if I'm taking up too much time, I understand.
It's okay. It's okay. You're doing great.
Okay. I'm going to give one. I'm going to say occasionally someone comes along, like I'm going to say like a George Fox or a Gandhi or Martin Luther King, who are willing to sacrifice their lives for the betterment of mankind. And since I've got you on the line, Forrest, I think you'll be able to understand what I'm saying, at least, that this appears to go against a normal response of self-preservation, which means to me that there could be a force in the universe that is slowly guiding mankind toward what I would consider a more godlike response that wasn't in line with natural responses. What about?
Okay, I have a lot of problems with that one.
Okay.
So,
Right.
just to start with, you mentioned like Gandhi and Martin Luther King. They did give their lives for their cause, not on purpose. They were both assassinated. I guarantee neither one of them were excited about the situation. They were murdered by people. So like, that doesn't really track for me. However, not sticking just to those guys, there are other situations in which people have sacrificed their lives intentionally for the good of humanity as a whole. The first thing that came to mind was like the Chernobyl liquidators, you know what I mean? Like the people who knew that they were going to die, but soldiers, you know, whatever, who do these things knowing they're going to die, but it's for the betterment of their community. That does not go against nature. Especially in a highly social species like ours, duty and service, I totally just said duty, and service to your community, especially to family and those you perceive as family, is a highly motivating factor that actually is selectively like advantageous. When we talk about evolution, we can actually dig into that. There's direct fitness, which is your reproduction and your offspring's reproduction. And then there's indirect fitness, which is talking about your family members. Like I would gladly give my life for 2 brothers or 8 cousins kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like that if you're helping your family members reproduce, that's still a fitness benefit to the species overall. And so there's still a thing there. Altogether, we call that inclusive fitness. It's a whole bonanza of weird terms, but there's still what I'm trying to get across is that there is a naturalistic explanation for this. And even if there wasn't, I don't think that leads to godly behavior, considering the fact that like there's none of that in the God that you worship in terms of like this self-sacrificing behavior. We don't see that in your God.
Okay, one point I would like to ask you about, what about the, I guess it's a fact, that people in general, the public, looks at people like that, like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and there's something in them that says, this is a godlike characteristic, whatever you want to call God, or sacrificial type. Which wouldn't happen with, say, the people that flew planes into the World Trade Center, but they look at these people
Absolutely would.
and they are willing to follow them and say, this is godlike and I want to follow them.
I want to push back on that. Absolutely. That is the same exact thing. So Martin Luther King and Gandhi worshipped different gods and had vastly different religions and did what they did for the betterment of their communities and their people who were being oppressed. And they used religion sometimes as a motivator, but not all the time. And as far as, the terrorists who flew planes into buildings, like, I hate to break it to you, Hank, but they were devoutly religious and they were doing that for their God as well. And they were doing that because they believed that that was godly behavior. They were extremely it's funny because if we had their morality, if we believed in their doctrine, they would be incredibly moral people because they were so devoted to their morality that they were willing to sacrifice their lives for it. Like you were trying to attribute to Gandhi and MLK a minute ago. These are people who are so devoted to their godly beliefs that they did atrocious things. And we see that in Christianity too. This is not exclusively a thing in Islam. There have been plenty of Christian terrorists and plenty of Christian martyrs and plenty of Christian, people who went out there and committed heinous atrocities in the name of their God because they believed it was godly behavior. Lest we forget that that slavery was headed up by Christians in this country, that the Confederacy was the Articles of Secession from Texas specifically says we are leaving the United States to preserve slavery because that is what the Christian God tells us to do, and any Christian nation should do the same. The KKK is a Christian organization. The Lord's Resistance Army is a Christian organization. Plenty of Christian terrorists and plenty of Christian sons of bitches out there. So at the end of the day, you're describing the lengths to which fundamentalism can drive somebody. And it can drive somebody to very good extremes, or it can drive somebody to very bad extremes. But at the end of the day, the warning is that it can drive you to extremes. Humanism, atheism, secularism, belief in the virtue of humanity for humanity's sakes, those things can also lead you to an extreme, but only in a good direction. We have yet to see an atheist terrorist who is out there hurting people because they're just so atheist and they want to prove atheism. That hasn't happened yet as far as I know, but we've seen plenty of people bombing people, destroying hospitals, flying planes and buildings to prove their religion. We've seen that quite a bit.
Again, I agree with you 100%, but I wasn't talking about Gandhi and Martin Luther King. I was talking about other people that when they do things where they're self-sacrificing, other people look at it. What is it in other people that make them think this is a godly thing? Not the people themselves, but other people.
I don't understand why you go to godly thing. I like that. That sounds like a very subjective and human determined sort of classification for things. I mean, if you're just talking about self-sacrifice, I don't see how self-sacrifice is a godly thing. I mean, I just don't understand why you would think that is a godly thing. What's your how do you define what a godly thing is?
John, you're right. I shouldn't have said godly. It's that people look at them and think this is the right thing to do. I'm willing to follow this person.
I think that's just
how is this supernatural? Sorry.
Yeah, no. I'm saying the same thing as you. I think that just speaks to culture. I think that just speaks to the fact that to sacrifice yourself for something that you believe in, especially if that thing happens to be the benefit of all humanity, is an incredibly brave and selfless thing to do. And we all aspire to be so cool because we kind of have that culture of it's better to help people around you. And if you see someone who's willing to kill themselves over how much they're willing to help people, that's great. I, as an atheist, can look to Gandhi and say, hey, a lot of what he did and spoke for and stood for was wonderful. And I aspire to be as great as he was someday. But I can also look at some of the shitty things that he said and some of the shitty things that he did and be like, I don't want to be that guy though, you know? And so like that, all you're telling me is that like, you know, we are challenged by people who exceed our expectations and exceed our limitations and do great things. And we're compelled by their incredible moral character and selflessness, the same way that we are compelled by seeing a great athlete. And they, in their greatness, challenge us to go out and strive to be better, you know, or a great mathematician or scientist, and they compel us to go be smarter and to work harder. And like that, I think that's just the nature of humans as competitive little monkeys, man. That's just what we do. Oh, John, do you have anything else you want to throw on there?
Well, yeah, I just, I really don't understand how, you know, self-sacrifice is in any way points towards, you know, a divine figure. Cause like, I could, you know, decide to sacrifice myself, you know, for the betterment of mankind or whatnot. And people could follow me, but that doesn't make me like God. It doesn't make me like any kind of divine figure. It just makes me somebody that, you know, sacrifice it. Like that's just a fact. I sacrifice myself or whatever. Maybe that it,
doesn't prop any. I was going to say it doesn't suppose that there's any divine thing either. Not just making you God, but it doesn't suppose that there's any divine thing like a God that made you do that. Because I think that's what Hank is hinting at.
Right. And I just don't think that necessarily entails anything about the supernatural or creator being or anything like that. Like, I just don't see the connection there. So that's where I'm getting lost.
Yeah. Hank, does that like answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. But you did bring up something that I've often wondered about. When you look at the rate of atheists that are in prison compared to the rate of other people, religious people that are in prison, you'll see that it's incredibly small. And I'm wondering why atheists don't make the argument that if everybody converted to atheism, we could pretty much eliminate prisons.
Oh, I can answer that.
Make any sense is why. Yeah, go ahead.
Well,
I've been talking for a while.
Yeah, I mean, because, you know, breaking the law. Well, hold on, Hank. So breaking the law, being a shithead or, you know, being evil to your fellow man or whatnot, that exists across the religious spectrum. So like religious, non-religious, it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, I don't think that becoming an atheist inherently makes you a better person, but I do think that, you know, decoupling yourself from the very archaic ideas that religion convinces you to accept can potentially make you a better person. But I don't think that you're inherently a better person just because you don't believe in a God. It's a very nuanced thing, but definitely becoming an atheist or shedding religious ideals does not inherently make you a better person.
Yeah, I would say that the atheists are a smaller percentage of the population, so it would make sense that they would be a smaller percentage of the prison population as well. However, to your point, they are like disproportionately smaller. Like they are not even represented at the rate that you would expect with their small population size. But the main reason we wouldn't use that as an argument is that although atheists, you know, would, I guess, have a better reason to be more humanistic and to not do heinous, shitty things, at the end of the day, correlation isn't causation. And I can understand why that's, you know, it would be an illogical argument. And it wouldn't serve anybody any real good. I love the idea of eliminating prisons, but I don't think atheism is the way to do it. I think, you know, a better society is the way to do it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate
with that,
guys. And
yeah. And I want to hear your last two things. I hope you call us again sometime and tell us.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Take care, Hank. I appreciate you. Later. Hank's great. Hank's great too.
I thought that was a good call.
The man's willing to listen sincerely, it seems, at least, and a little bit. And the questions aren't awful. The questions are the kind of questions that I would expect from somebody who's been a lifelong believer, and has grown up around church-going folk with church-going ideas. And that's what I hear a lot in Hank. But the man is willing to hear us out as we ramble for a long time, and I really do appreciate that. That's what these shows are for, y'all.
I agree.
We've got a bunch of calls left, and we have 30 minutes left in the show. Let's do, you know what? This may be the entirely complete opposite of Hank's call. Because this, I gotta be honest with you, I'm reading the call screen here. This is a hell of a topic, figuratively and literally, because the topic is about hell. Let's talk to Dave, pronouns he, him, who says, I wanted to make a comment about the idea of hell existing while a loving God exists. I don't think those two are compatible. So let's see what Dave has to say. Dave, you are on AXB with Forrest and John. How you doing today?
Hi there.
Hey.
I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
Never had a bad day, man.
Doing good.
Awesome. So this is the first time I've called into a show like this, so I'm not quite certain how this works, but yeah. Where
I can walk you through it if you like.
You guys start? Or?
So basically, like, you can expect us to talk quite a bit because the audience is here to listen to what the atheists say to what you're saying. So forgive us for that. We're going to try to guide the conversation insofar as like keeping it on track, but we will do our best not to control and dominate it. We will be as pleasant as you are. So as long as you're not interrupting, insulting, and like that, we'll try to avoid that as well, unless we get real fired up. We will be respectful of you as much as you allow us to be. We will not be respectful of your God. And a great place for you to start is by telling us what God you believe in.
Sure. I believe in the Christian God. So I am a Christian, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do believe that God sent his son to the earth for him to die for our sins, for mankind.
Okay.
And likewise, in transitioning into the main topic, Jesus was a very loving person, and he reflected the qualities of the Father perfectly. Therefore, it makes no sense that hell fire should exist, aka the idea that souls are burned eternally in hell. I saw, the whole reason I'm calling this is I saw a reel that you guys had on someone posted on Instagram where the man you were basically arguing that they were incompatible, and I agreed with you actually, because they aren't. So through the study of the scriptures that I have done, essentially, I have drawn the conclusion that while hell may exist, or the technical definition of it, hellfire, or the fact that souls are thrown into it eternally, does not. Basically, I do not believe that the soul... Oh,
no, you're fine. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was going to ask you some follow-up questions, but go ahead and finish what you're saying first.
No, go ahead.
Okay. So from what I'm understanding, you believe in the Christian God, you believe in Jesus. You say that Jesus was a loving person and was reflecting of the God of the Bible. And you say that hellfire doesn't exist because that is not a loving condition. And so when the Bible talks about wailing and gnashing of teeth and all those things, you're assuming that has a different interpretation or different meaning. So my follow-up question would be to understand that a little bit better. Do you believe that the Bible is literally true or figuratively true and it needs to be interpreted?
Well, it's both. Certain parts need to be interpreted and certain parts are literal. So, for instance, there are stories that are literal that did happen. So, for instance, David and Goliath, I believe that actually happened, that was a historical event. Yet the rich man and Lazarus story, I believe, was a parable and was symbolic and should be interpreted symbolically.
Well, okay. Can I
What
ask?
about-
Do you think the Lazarus of the Gospel of John is a real thing?
Okay, so there's two Lazaruses. The Lazarus that was Jesus' friend that he raised from the dead after 4 days. I do believe that was a historical event. But the story of rich man and Lazarus, of the weeping and the gnashing of the teeth, and seeing, from hell looking up into heaven, that is a parable that should be interpreted symbolically.
Okay. What about one last question from me before I jump in is, do you believe that the God character, the caricature presented of God throughout the entire Bible, Old and New Testament, including Jesus, because I'm assuming you're talking about like Trinitarianism type thing, right? That Jesus is God, is that right?
Actually, personally, the word Trinity is not in the Bible.
Okay, cool. So then I can separate them. That's fine. So same question then, but I'll separate them out. Do you believe that the character of God in the Old and New Testaments and the character of Jesus in the New Testament, do you believe that the way that the Bible presents these characters is an accurate depiction of who they really are? Or do you think that, like, the things that God says in the Bible, the things that God does in the Bible, the things that Jesus says and does, that some of those are also parables or poetry to be interpreted?
So it's sounding like the same thing, which is it has to be taken in context, right? Certain things did happen and certain things did not. But regardless,
can you give me an example of a commandment or action of God, not Jesus, a commandment or action that God takes in the Bible or gives in the Bible that is not to be taken literally, that is actually to be interpreted?
There's several. Once again, you would have to give me like a specific instance, and then I could tell you whether or not I believe it should be interpreted literally or symbolically.
I got a great one. Sorry. I got a great one, Dave. Just as like a test here. Do you know Numbers 31?
You can specify.
Well, I mean, okay, so Numbers 31 is where God orders Moses to go and utterly destroy all of the Midianites. When he doesn't utterly destroy all the Midianites, but he saves like the young women, all the women and children and everything like that. Moses gets mad on behalf of God, and then he commands them to go back in and kill all of the women who have known a man, as well as all the children, all the little boy children, and all the men and everybody in the city, except for all of the virgin girls, so that they can take them as plunder. And then later on in Numbers 31, it actually specifies what they were supposed to do with those virgin girls, and that's that they were supposed to be forced into marriages to Israelites. But one out of every 500 of these little girls was to be sacrificed as a burnt offering to God. So now in Numbers 31, is that something that needs to be interpreted, or is that something that literally happened as a matter of history, like God handed down those commands?
Okay, so I do believe that, you're going to have to specify one point of that. There's one point of that I think needs to be clarified. I do not recall any instance of God requiring a human sacrifice. That does not.
Hold on. You don't think you can think of any one instance in which? Sorry.
Hold on. Sorry about that. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Obviously. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. That was wildly. Okay. Jesus. Obviously. Okay. Sorry.
Jesus, and also like Jephthah's daughter, for example. Jephthah's daughter is another one. Jephthah is I believe he was a general, and he prays to God and says, "If you let me win this battle, I will sacrifice the first thing that comes to my home." He goes home; it's his daughter, and he sacrifices her to God. Right. God knew that was going to happen.
Okay, but hold on. So Jephthah's daughter was not sacrificed. She did not give her life in
No, she
literal
did.
sense. She was
She
sacrificed.
did.
No.
Oh my God! Hold on.
You're saying that Jephthah's daughter was killed? Let me
find the verse.
Hold on. Jephthah's daughter was sacrificed, yes, but she served her days in the temple. She was sacrificed in the way that she was not able to basically get married. She was dedicated to the temple. She was not killed. She was not.
No. Oh my God! This is so wrong.
Expecting.
I'm finding it. Hold on, because I've heard this before, and I just want to find it really quickly.
She
All right, can I read it? Can I read it? So, this is Judges. This is Judges 11, right? If you turn in your Bible, Judges 11. If you go all the way down to verse 31, this is part of Jephthah's promise to God. Whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's. And let me just shout this so that everybody can hear, and I only have to say it once. And I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering.
And then in 38, 39, she goes up into the mountains to cry about how she's never going to have sex. And then in 39, after 2 months of crying about the fact that she's going to die a virgin, she comes down and it says, as she returned to her father, who did with her according to his vow that he had vowed. So in the beginning of the chapter, Jephthah says, I will sacrifice as burnt offering whatever comes out of my house. And then at the end of the chapter, he says he does what he swore he would do to his daughter. So none of that says that she lived out her life in the temple.
Okay. So I will need to, because this is the first I've ever heard of that interpretation. I will.
That's what it says in the book, yo.
We're not interpreting it. We're literally using our eyes to read the words on the page.
Okay. And so, and I will grant that I definitely need to do more research on that, because I was not expecting this.
Hold on. Sorry, Dave. I need to ask Forrest something. Forrest.
However,
hold on, Dave. I need to ask Forrest something. Forrest. Hey. If I were to tell you to sacrifice a small child as a burnt offering to God, do you think that you need to interpret that, or like you need to anything figure out a way to get around it?
If you came to me and told me to sacrifice a child for any reason, I would call first a cab and then the police.
Yeah, so there's no need to interpret anything about it.
So I need to. Okay, so first off, I just want to say that we're getting a bit off topic. The original topic that I had started off was that of hellfire, right? And so I understand that the reasoning that has led up to this point so far was, I believe, that you guys were trying to essentially say that there are many acts of wrath that God exacts upon his children, and therefore
that's not really what we're going for.
To go to.
So, sorry, that's not really what we're going for, because here's the thing, man, is that when you said that, I took notes of what you said. You said that hellfire doesn't mean literal hellfire. When they talk about fire, brimstone, gnashing of teeth, wailing, whatever it is that the Bible says. I remember wailing and gnashing of teeth. I don't remember. I think lake of fire is in there as well. You believe these are metaphorical terms because that does not comport with your idea of an eternally loving God. I get that. I wrote it down. Quite frankly, it doesn't, I'm not interested in hashing it out too much, because there are over 40,000 denominations of Christianity. We talked to all of them on this show. You said you saw a clip of us on Instagram talking about this. I think I know what clip that was, because there was one that went very viral. The thing is, that guy that we were talking to was a Christian who did believe that there was literal actual fire and brimstone and hellfire and a lake of fire and literal conscious torture and all these things. He did believe that. And I have talked to other Christians on this show who believe that it is just a separation from God. And I've talked to other Christians on this show who believe that it's annihilation. And I've talked to other Christians on this show who believe that it is painful and suffering, but it's just for a minute. It's just a little tiny bit of it. And it's not, I've talked to, and at the end of the day, it doesn't mean anything. What I'm more interested in is, okay, cool, you believe that. I'm more interested in what you're talking here about how the Bible needs to be interpreted sometimes, because the God of the Bible is a monster, Dave. Front to back, the Bible is a pro-slavery book. The Bible is pro-genocide. The Bible is pro-misogyny. The Bible is pro-rape. The Bible is an awful text with an awful God who says and does awful things. And so I'm curious if this is the stance you're taking, that you don't believe in hell because it violates this concept of love, and that all these things need to be interpreted. I want to figure out what you actually mean by these interpretations, where you're actually drawing these lines, and on what authority you're drawing those lines. That's more interesting to me by a lot. Because at the end of the day, if you just say, I don't believe hell's this, okay, you're in version 39,864 of Christianity. Neat. That doesn't tell me much.
Fair enough. I mean, ultimately, what it comes down to is that I believe that the Bible is, when self-contained, true to itself, that there are no contradictions. And I know that you guys have you guys probably have a huge list for trying to take me down.
Because we've read the damn thing.
And so have I. But let me answer.
Well, hold on. Have you? Because you've never heard of Jephthah's daughter.
Well, I mean, that is a footnote, but no, you say there's no contradictions. What do you think about the resurrection? Arguably the most important part of the whole Bible, the point of the story, right? The resurrection, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John each tell different versions of this story that are incompatible with one another. So right there, what do you think about that? How is it not a contradiction when you have 4 gospels telling totally different stories of the most important part of the book?
Okay, the resurrection of Jesus?
Jesus, yes.
Which resurrection are you talking about? Because there's multiple ones. Oh, okay, I see.
The one from the tomb. He was put in the tomb, and then after 3 days, he was raised from the dead.
Right.
That story has 4 different versions, a different one in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So if the Bible has no contradictions, what about the contradictions, though?
I believe that all of those events took place as they are described, but they may have been taking place at different times.
Okay. If I can ask,
basically,
if I can ask one particular contradiction
happened, but
well, Dave, I've got one particular contradiction. Like a question to ask you is, see if you can give me a definite answer based on your knowledge of the Gospels and the resurrection story contained in all 4 Gospels. How many angels were at the tomb when the women got there?
It's off the top of my memory, but I believe it was 2.
That's one answer. Yeah, that's one answer. There's either 2, none, or 1. It's either 2, none, or 1.
In Matthew, it's 1. In Mark and Luke, it's none. And in John, it's 2. So if you're saying these things happened at different times, then how many times did Mary go to the tomb and see these different angels and be surprised each time? Like what's going on with that?
That's an excellent specific situation that, I need to do more research on.
Yeah, so, I would also ask, like, how did the tomb cover become opened? Because there even on that detail, there's multiple different correct answers. Matthew says that the tomb was closed when Mary got there, and then there was a great earthquake, and then an angel appeared, rolled the tomb away, and rolled the stone away, and sat on top of it. Mark, Luke, and John all say that the tomb was already open when she got there, and that's why she ran inside, freaking out, wanting to see what had happened. That's very different. Also, when it comes to whether or not Jesus is actually there, in Matthew, when the angel opens a tomb, Mary runs in, Jesus isn't there, and the angel says, yeah, he's already gone.
In Mark and Luke, the tomb is already open, and also Jesus is already gone. But in John, he appears, he shows up, and he's like, "Yo, I haven't ascended yet, but don't touch me," and then he fucks off after that. So like, that's not even the beginning, man. There's a ton of contradictions between those stories, and that's the end of the Bible. The very beginning of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2, are also completely different stories that tell different events happening in different orders, but that cannot possibly overlap. So like, what you have here is a book that, again, it cover to cover, this book is pro-slavery, this book is pro-genocide, this book is pro-misogyny, pro-rape. It is not a good book. It has a couple of good lessons in there, but so does The Lord of the Rings, you know? And it's full of contradictions, it's full of plot holes, it's full of folklore and things that you don't accept today. It looks exactly as you would expect it to look if it were just a collection of stories put together by humans with a political agenda. It looks nothing like what you would expect it to look if it was the inspired word of the most intelligent being in the universe. So what it sounds to me, Dave, is that when you say that certain parts are literal, those are the parts you like. And when you say that certain parts need to be interpreted, those are the parts that you either don't like or don't know about. And you just have this story, this preferred version of Christianity that appeals to you, that doesn't work for 39,999 other kinds of Christians out there, but it's enough to make you feel like you're going to go to heaven, so you don't really care. Does that sound like a fair summary, or do you think I'm missing something?
Well, a few specific, for the most part, I think you're right, but on the smaller portions, like, there's a few key differences. First off, I never said that Jephthah's daughter was to be interpreted symbolically. I do believe that story happened. I simply said I needed some time to look into it. Regarding the Gospels, I'm saying a similar thing. Thing is that you guys, you are extremely intelligent. You have done a ton of research. And I really appreciate, and I can appreciate the effort that you guys have gone through, right? And so you have this list, of contradictions, and I get it, right? The thing is that I think that with enough study, that admittedly I need to do more of, and I know that it probably sounds weak, because I'm saying this and I don't have the answers for you right now, right here, for every single contradiction that you guys have. But, there's a lot of things that require additional study. So what I am saying is that, I need some time to take these things that you guys have said, because you guys are very well aware, I'm sure, that oftentimes we don't talk to people, Christians don't talk to people that are as studious as you guys, right?
But
so
as atheists tend to be. So here's the thing, Dave, is that like I didn't have a prepared list here. Like I do have some notes. Like when I'm reading, I'm just looking through my Bible, right? And my Bible is full of highlights and notes in the margins and all sorts of stuff. And literally, like that part that we just went over, like the different gospel accounts of the resurrection, I literally drew a table on the page showing like these different things did this happen, and just comparing the things that I read. So like my notebook is the book that you believe is true. And it sounds like you're saying, well, I need more time to think about this. I don't think you do. I think you can start right now by just asking yourself, do you have a good reason to believe this God exists in the first place? That I think that's a great place to start, because if your reason for believing is the Bible, you don't have a good reason to believe.
The Bible is one of the reasons that I believe.
Okay, what's another one?
There is more.
What's another one? What's the best reason you believe? What's the biggest one?
I would say, I would say that it leads to the best life that one can live. Because
Christianity does?
If someone is actually, well, yes. because in the Bible, and admittedly, there are many things in the Old Testament that you guys have clearly, have issues with, the, misogyny and the, like
slavery,
those things. I understand that.
Sexual slavery, yeah, that's pretty bad.
They were
it's a whole thing.
Time. They were right. So I hear what you guys are saying there, right? What I am also saying is that the principles that are found in the Bible on how to treat your fellow man, mostly in the New Testament, are timeless. And one of
if they're timeless, Dave, if they're timeless, where in the New Testament does it disapprove of slavery? Like where does it say that God doesn't like slavery and that slavery shouldn't be a thing that exists?
So the definitions of slavery the definition
you don't want to do that.
That's used in the Bible.
You don't want to do that.
I believe.
Dave.
What do you mean?
You don't want to go down the definitions, because that is something that I think we can agree there's no good slavery, right?
No good slavery.
Yeah.
No good slavery.
Can we agree on that?
What was going on in the Old Testament was.
Oh man.
Well, yeah. Okay. You know what?
just to cut, Dave, I'm not trying to be an asshole to you. I'm really not. But just to cut you off here and just save everybody some time, right? The Bible is very clear in Exodus and Leviticus that there are different rules for Hebrew slaves and non-Hebrew slaves. If they take a Hebrew slave, then they're supposed to let them go after 7 years, and it's more of an indentured servitude sort of thing. Except if they come into slavery married, then they're able to go out married as well. But if a man is enslaved and you give him a wife and they have children, his wife and children remain your slaves forever. And if he wants to stay with them, he must also agree to remain your slave forever. That's just for Hebrew slaves. For non-Hebrew slaves, where it specifically says take slaves from the heathen among you, including the resident aliens and all these things, for those people, they are just slaves forever. It specifically tells you how hard you're allowed to beat them. It specifically says that they are your property to pass down to your children, that they have no freedom. It is trying to pull the bullshit apologetics thing of saying, well, it was different slavery. I promise it is not, and it's not going to work out for you. So can we agree that there's no good slave? There is no kind of slavery that is a pleasant or good or moral thing. And we just start with that, and that way we don't have to go down this whole thing. We can cite the verses to you, dude, but I don't think you want it either.
Agreed.
Okay, so that's what John's question was. Is there ever a point in the Bible where God, even Jesus, says, hey, y'all, don't own people? Does that ever happen?
Off the top of my head, I can't remember.
That's because there isn't one. There's not. There's plenty of things about slaves obeying their masters, and that they might get a portion of their piece in heaven if they're Christian masters, but that's about it. There are some things that some apologists like to point to, where people say, you should be kind to your bondsmen and be kind to your slaves. They're still fucking slaves, and that's not good enough for me. And you're saying that these are timeless moral lessons. There are a couple, love your neighbor, but literally every religion has that. And also every philosophy that isn't a religion, like Confucianism, has, treat everybody how you want to be treated. Damn near every moral view in the world has come up with that one. So there's nothing special about the Bible that separates it from other religions, other doctrines, other ideologies, secular ideologies even. There's nothing good in the Bible or in Christianity that you can't get without the baggage of this evil God and his evil teachings, which again, don't look anything like a divinely inspired text full of wisdom, but do look exactly like a bunch of shit that a bunch of Palestinian goat herders wrote down 2,000 years ago to help control their society. That's what it looks like, and that's what it is.
I can see your perspective a lot clearer. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
If I'm being completely honest, a part of the reason why I wanted to call into this show was because I really wanted to see what kind of, basically what you guys thought about these types of things. I really wanted to understand these things, and you're absolutely right.
I love that. That is the point of this show, and I really genuinely appreciate you doing that.
Yeah.
Can I ask you?
I need to do more research, and I freely admit that.
Yeah, no, and I hope you call back. I hope you call back, especially when I'm on. I'm sure John would say the same. I've enjoyed this conversation thoroughly because you're very honest about what you're saying. I will ask you one more question, and then we got to wrap up. But really quick, last question. You said that Christianity provides the best life, or something along those lines. I don't want to be straw manning you here, but you said something along the lines that Christianity is the best life.
Yeah.
How does that work out for women and LGBT people?
Those are definitely hot button topics for sure. But
yeah,
I would
historically
say,
not great in terms of Christian populations.
Historically not great. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Historically not great. I believe that the interpretations of most with the Bible and how women should be treated has been grossly twisted. Similarly with LGBTQ and them. The core lesson of Christianity is to love thy neighbor. And so it really is a thing of, even if you don't agree with someone, even if you don't think that what they're doing is good. And then I'm speaking specifically on the LGBT side of this.
We can all agree that being a woman is not good.
Right? Oh, that's
stop it, women.
10%.
Yeah. Yeah, stop it, women.
And so
stop being
on the mistreating of well, yeah. So on the treatment of women's side, the Bible is extremely clear that true men care for their wives and treat them with love and respect. Now, it does state that men should be the leader of the family, the head of the family. And that is a position that has been twisted, where instead of a head and a leader, they decide that means that they can be a despot and a king. And that is wrong. And that is a great tragedy that is attributed to Christianity when there are abusive husbands.
And that right there, I think that's where we're going to leave it. I think that's where we're going to leave it because it is the end of the show. But I want to tell you, that is yet another area that I would encourage you to do more research in what the Bible actually says. Because what the Bible actually says about women and what it actually says about wives and where you can get them and how you can treat them certainly doesn't say that a true good man would be respectful. It's very, very much not that. So I think that's the next thing you should look into. And I think that you should call us back sometime. John and I also host other shows all over the internet. If you want to find us wherever, would love to talk to you some more. But yeah, I don't think your God is real, Dave. Sure and if he is, he's an asshole. And I want to talk to you about it more whenever you have the time.
Well, I'm sure that clip of me saying I don't recall God is going to requiring a human sacrifice is going to go viral. So y'all enjoy that one. That was a death.
I don't make the clips. I don't make the clips. I don't know if our clip makers are that cruel, but I can't control it. So if it happens, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but
if it's any consolation, I have made similar mistakes literally my entire career. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. But all right, thanks.
All right. Thanks so much, David. Take care.
See you, Dave.
Bye. You know what? Can somebody be mean so we can have somebody to screen? It's been a pleasant show. It's been a delight. I think we would take 3 calls, and it was just awesome the whole time.
Yeah. I had a really good time today. I thought the calls were great. I do wish that there would have been some more contentious callers, but it's whatever.
Yeah. We've got a few. Oh my God, we got some super chats here. I'm going to try to crank through a few of them really quickly. Bob sent a crazy face. somebody looking all excited. Nero Mal sent Happy Mother's Day. Y'all mamas out there are legendary fighters, protectors, artists, brilliant minds, and beautiful hearts. Brag about it. Miranda Rensberger said, have you ever seen a human body? Dumbest design ever. I've dissected plenty, and let me tell you, there's some issues in there. Blind Limey, get out of here. Said, my eyes are badly designed and worse built. I've got a couple of Cybertrucks in my face. I also consider the scrotum. Have you seen one? It's eldritch. Eldritch is a great way to describe the scrotum. Keller Communications said, only donating to keep Miranda Rensberger company. Happy Sunday, heathens. Omar Kimbaya, cool name, said, thanks ACA for the show. If any theists are watching and have a good argument for God, please call in. We got some interesting ones. We're open to any good evidence. Nero Mal said only 10% of about 10% of people have NDEs. Only about 10% of NDEs happen near death. That's 800 million NDEs among today's population. That's not unlikely at all. Randy said, appreciate your endurance, patience, knowledge, and especially to both of your families for sharing their time with you. With all of us. I didn't understand the process of that sentence, but I get it now. Thank you. Thank you. Nero Mal said, people trusting people they see as good and moral. That's the oxytocin receptor gene, OXTR gene. Correct me if I'm wrong, Forrest. I won't correct you because that is, I don't know. I'm not familiar with that. And meterator. What are they measuring with their meters? IME trader, becoming an atheist makes one a better person, as atheists are not required to hate anybody, especially other religions, homosexuals, or trans people. Damn fucking right. Those are all the things. Before we end, I just want to take a second to thank Secular Rarity for hanging out and helping us out today as our backup. There he is.
Hey.
Oh boy. Hey.
Oh my gosh. I was at that last one. I was screaming Jesus. He was like, God never requires human sacrifice. I'm like, that's the whole point of the second half of the book.
That's the entire story. I appreciate him catching himself and owning up to it. That was very cool of him.
No,
very
and
cool.
it was. You both are right. There were some really good calls where people seemed willing to actually take in new information. And as always, you guys are great about walking people through it and giving them that compassion when they need it, and holding motherfuckers accountable when they need it. So
means a lot. I gotta do another show with you and J Mike.
Yeah,
we can have like the deep philosophical talks and everything like that. Get into the meat of the situation.
We gotta yell at like Greg or somebody behind the scenes is in charge of that. We'll
Everybody come to Tulsa and I'll make y'all some great gumbo and we'll just have a great show here in my studio. We'll just run through the whole thing. It'll be great. It'll be an awesome time. With that, everybody, thanks so much for tuning in. This has been the Atheist Experience, the most calm show ever produced on this channel. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you so much to our crew. Thanks so much to the people in chat. Thank you so much to our callers. Thanks so much to our mods and our call screeners. And thank you to Elliot for hanging out. Thank you to John for being my co-host today. I don't even know how to end it. Thank you so much, everybody. Have an awesome rest of your day. Bye.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to start questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's any of your business what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your eyes.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.